Welcome to Black Gold Farms Forklift Safety Training. My name is Tony Vignes. I'm the Safety Coordinator for Black Gold Farms, and I will be taking you through the classroom portion of your forklift training in this video. Things we'll cover today are the different types of forklifts, how they operate, the hazards of forklift operation, how to operate a forklift safely, and we'll talk a little bit about forklift-related injuries. From an OSHA standpoint, OSHA doesn't require training on a forklift per se. They use the term powered industrial truck. You need to be trained before you can operate a powered industrial truck. What is that? It's any mobile power-propelled truck used to carry, push, pull, lift, stack, or tier materials. This includes forklifts, electric pallet jacks, things of that nature, but the term they use is powered industrial truck. Keep in mind that any equipment that is designed to move earth but has been modified to have forks put on it is not included in this standard. So things like a yard tractor or a bobcat, those are earth moving equipment. They do not fall under the powered industrial truck standard. They still require training, but training of a different nature. So out of the four pieces of equipment shown in these pictures, the first two would be considered powered industrial trucks, the sit-down forklift and the electric pallet jack. The manual pallet jack is not power propelled and therefore does not qualify, and the yard tractor is earth moving equipment. So again, that does not fall into this category. There are 7 different classes of powered industrial truck. The reason that this is significant is that you are required to receive training on every class of truck you're going to operate. Now, what we use at most of our locations are going to be electric sit-down riders or propane-powered sit-down riders with either solid or pneumatic tires. So you're talking either Class 1, Class 4, or Class 5. We also use some electric pallet jacks, which would be Class 3. This classroom training basically covers all of the required material for Classes 1 through 6. Okay, Class 7 is typically a different classroom training. In addition to classroom training, there are 2 more parts of your forklift training before you are considered fully trained, and that would be practical training, which is hands-on, somebody actually showing you physically how to run the machine, where the different parts are located, what the controls do, things like that. And then there is an evaluation of your skills. Until you have completed the classroom training, the practical training, and the evaluation of your skills, your training is not complete. Okay, so we're covering the classroom portion right now for classes 1 through 6. And then you would have to receive practical training on each type of truck you're going to operate. So class 1, like I said, is basic electric riders, pretty common stuff. Class 2 would be your narrow aisle warehouse style forklifts. Typically they're stand-ups, include things like order pickers and swing masts. Class 3 is your electric pallet jacks. They come in different types, walkies, riders, etc. Class 4 would be internal combustion, meaning fuel-powered sit-down trucks with solid tires. Solid tires are designed for better traction on smooth surfaces and indoor use only. When they're driven on rougher terrain, the tires get eaten up really quickly. They also have a little bit less ground clearance. Class 5 is what we use at most of our locations. That is a fuel-powered sit-down truck with pneumatic tires. Ours are often foam-filled, but pneumatic tires designed for rough surfaces and indoor or outdoor use. Okay, because the tread on those tires is better able to handle rougher surfaces, and they perform slightly better on slick surfaces, ramps, etc. Class 6 would be industrial tractors and tugs. Class 7 would be your rough terrain or boom type forklifts that do require a separate training. So if you're new to forklifts, the best way to describe how they operate is to compare them to a car. Although the forklift may be smaller than your car, it can have up to 6 times the weight. You've got reduced visibility due to the mast in front, the overhead supports to the sides and rear. Most of them use rear wheel steering, so when you turn, your rear end is going to swing out. They operate in a more complex traffic environment, especially our environments are very congested. They've got a less smooth ride due to the tire types, and they're more sensitive to shifts in the center of gravity, so they're more likely to tip over if you are not careful. A forklift has triangular stability, which we'll get into a little bit later, versus a car's 4-point stability. That's what makes them easier to tip. And then, like I mentioned earlier, remember that the rear end is going to swing out when you turn. So when you make a turn in a forklift, you must always be aware of where your rear end is going. You can see in the diagram below the difference. You're going to pivot on the inside front tire when you turn a forklift. You have to be trained on the controls of each truck you're going to operate. You have to know where they are, what they do, and how they operate. This is a picture of one of our forklifts in East Grand Forks on the floor. On the far right, the tall, skinny pedal will be your accelerator. The other two pedals are brakes. And then you will have levers, and pretty standard on all forklifts across manufacturers, across forklift types, is that the first lever closest to the steering wheel is for raising and lowering the forks. The second lever is for tilting the forks, and the third one is for any attachments. In our case, most of our forklifts have a side shifter, which allows you to move the carriage of the forklift, meaning the forks, left to right. As far as engine and motor operation, we don't expect you to be mechanics, but you have to know, how does your truck run? Does it run on fuel, or does it run on a battery? If it runs on fuel, what kind of fuel? Is it propane? Is it diesel? And how do I refuel it? So someone will have to physically show you how to change out our propane tanks. You have to receive training on any special features and attachments. Like I said, side shifters are the most common attachment, especially here at Black Gold Farms. They're not the most complicated thing to use, but you have to understand that they will cause your carriage to move from side to side. A legible nameplate is required on all forklifts, and the operator has to be able to read and explain that nameplate. It's going to include any modifications and attachments made to the forklift. It's going to explain to you the forklift's capacity, load center, lift height, and make and model info. So that picture there is not very clear, so we'll go to one that's a little bit better, closer up. What you can see in that table down at the bottom, all right, where the columns are labeled A, B, and C. Column A is your maximum lift height. It is listed both in inches and in millimeters. Column B is your load center. Standard load center is 24 inches. That is roughly half the length or width of a standard pallet. You'll see that they also provide capacity based on a 30-inch load center if you go down to the second to last row there. Okay, so 189-inch maximum lift height on this particular truck with a 24-inch load center. You can lift 2,750 pounds. You'll notice if you look down those two rows, if you change that load center to 30 inches, you move it 6 inches out, you are now not able to lift as much weight. That's because the truck's center of gravity is shifted forward. If you tried to still lift 2,750 pounds with a 30-inch load center, meaning the center of gravity of your load is 30 inches away from the backrest of your forks, you would tip over. Okay, so the further away you move from the backrest, the less weight you are able to lift. Changing the load center changes the load capacity, and there will be a video here that explains that to you.
Every forklift has a rated capacity listed on the nameplate. As a qualified operator, you're expected to know where the nameplate is located and how to read it. The nameplate will specify a rated capacity for a specific load center. The load center is the distance from the back of the forks to the load's center of gravity. Most forklifts use a heavy counterweight to offset the weight of the load. Without this balancing counterweight, a loaded truck would tip over. The point on which the loaded truck would balance is called the truck's center of gravity. The truck is most stable when its center of gravity falls within the triangular-shaped area formed by the front wheels and the midpoint of the rear axle. This triangle-shaped area is referred to as the stability triangle. Lifting a load which exceeds the truck's capacity will cause the truck's center of gravity to shift too far forward, tipping the truck.
So again, the load center is just the distance from the vertical face of the forks to the load center of gravity. Standard load center is 24 inches. You can see there that in the example, load B is an 80-inch long load, so its load center would be at 24 inches if it's a uniform shaped load. Every inch that you move off the backrest adds roughly 100 pounds of weight, so it's important that you keep the load as close to the back of the forks as you can. In some cases, if you're moving a stack of bales, the backrest can tear up those paper bales, so you may not want to push it all the way back, but you want to get as close as you can. We talked a little bit about the stability triangle. Stability triangle, mentioned in that video too, is an imaginary shape formed by the front wheels and the midpoint of the rear axle. If the center of gravity stays inside that imaginary triangle, your truck will not tip. However, things like raising the load, adding weight to the front, braking, turning, all affect that center of gravity. Here's just another diagram of that same thing. You can see that when you have no load on, the vehicle's center of gravity is right in the middle of that triangle, but as you add weight to the front, this combined center of gravity shifts forward toward the front axle. If that center of gravity shifts past the front axle, that's when you tip forward.
In summary, a stable forklift and load has a center of gravity which is low and well within the stability triangle. Here are the factors that affect the center of gravity. Load weight is a major factor. As load weight increases, the center of gravity moves toward the load. Load balance affects the side-to-side location of the center of gravity. A load that is not centered will move the center of gravity to the side where the load is heavier. Load height is also a big influence on stability. The higher a load is raised, the more unstable the truck becomes. The higher a load, the less movement it will take to move the center of gravity out of the stability triangle.
I had a load that blocked my view, and I needed to carry it across the lot. So I raised it up high enough for me to see where I was going. I knew the load was within the truck's capacity, so I figured I was being safe. Well, the truck was pretty bouncy with the load way up there, and when I hit a pothole, I almost lost it. So I hit the brakes. Thank goodness I was wearing my seatbelt, or I don't know what would have happened.
Wearing your seatbelt is the best protection in the event of a tip over. It can be an extremely violent collision, but if you're able to remain inside the forklift, you're much more likely to get out unscathed. So some tips for what to do in the event of a tip over would be always put on your seatbelt. First thing you do when you get in the forklift before you turn the key is put your seatbelt on. If you get into a tip-over situation, do not attempt to jump out, okay? Because you're much more likely to get crushed by the truck if you do that. So the best thing you can do with your seatbelt on is hold on tight to the steering wheel, brace your feet, lean away from the point of impact, and lean forward so your head doesn't bounce off the supports for the overhead guard. Okay? If you do all those things, you are likely to get out of that tip-over with minimal injuries. There will be a video here that kind of demonstrates why you don't jump out of a tipping over forklift.
If your truck begins to tip, hold on to the wheel, brace your feet, and lean away from the direction of the tip over. Never attempt to jump out of a tipping forklift. Many operators have been violently crushed between the safety cage and ground.
Every operator is responsible for making sure their forklift functions properly. You are required to do an inspection at the beginning and end of each shift. In East Grand Forks, we have inspection books in bin number 3 in binders for each of our forklifts. What that pre-op inspection includes is a walk around. Okay, so you make sure, start off by making sure the forklift is properly disengaged. So the forks are down level on the floor, the key is off, it's in neutral, the parking brake is on. On the left and right sides, you want to check the tire condition, make sure your tires have good tread and aren't splitting open, that the lug nuts are tight, there's no debris wrapped around the axle, there's no cracks in the overhead guard, and there's no debris behind the mast. In the front, you want to make sure your forks aren't bent, the fork pins are in place so the forks don't move on you, the backrest is solid, the mast and chains are greased, and none of the hoses are leaking. Never check for hydraulic leaks with your hands. If you see hydraulic fluid dripping down one of the hoses, use a piece of, the first thing you should do is tell the equipment specialist, but if you're going to check for a leak, use a piece of cardboard or something to check for leaks, because you run the risk of a high pressure oil injection injury if you use your hand. In the rear, make sure your propane tank is secured. There should be a couple of metal straps that hold it in place, and make sure the radiator is clear of debris. Once you're in the seat, again, your seatbelt should already be on because you sat down in there. Do your non-moving checks. Check the gauges, the lights, the horn. Shift into reverse to check the backup alarm. If you have a blinking warning light, make sure that's working. Check the tilt and lift. Check to make sure the parking brake is functioning properly. And once you're moving, check the running brakes and the steering, and look where you were parked to see if anything leaked onto the floor. If you have any oil or fluid leaks, stop. Okay? Get the equipment specialist, figure out where the leak is, and determine whether or not it's safe to drive that forklift. That leak should be fixed as soon as possible. On a forklift, there are a lot of different components. There's the forks, there's the steering, there's the brakes, there's all kinds of stuff. The most serious defect that could possibly occur, if there's one component that we do not want to fail, that would be the brakes. As far as why, it should be fairly obvious to most. If you have no brakes, you cannot stop, right? If my forks don't work, I can't lift a load up, okay. Not the end of the world, right? That's not a safety hazard. I can't pick that load up off the floor. It's not the end of the world. If I'm moving and I cannot stop, that's unsafe for the driver and anybody else in the area. You're not going to have room to just crank the wheel and keep going in a circle till you lose momentum. You need brakes. That's why it's important to check those as soon as you get moving on the forklift. It's important to remember that only trained and authorized personnel are permitted to operate our forklifts. As an authorized operator, you going through this training are going to be an authorized operator. It's part of your responsibility to keep unauthorized employees off of the forklift. So if you see someone hopping on there who you know is not a forklift operator, stop them, okay, and get them off the lift. You're also responsible for keeping pedestrians away from the operating zone of your forklift. Pedestrians always have the right of way. It's your responsibility as an operator to make sure that they are aware you are coming through their area and that they stay out of the way. And you also have to lock out any unsafe lifts as determined in a pre-operation inspection. So if you find out that your brakes aren't functioning properly or that you're leaking hydraulic fluid all over the floor, it's important to make sure that we lock out that lift, meaning start by taking the key out of it so that no one can operate it. You should never drive your forklift up to anyone standing in front of a bench or a fixed object. The reason for that being what? They're going to get crushed, okay? Never allow anyone to stand or pass onto the elevated portion of your forklift.
When approaching blind intersections, corners, doorways, or similar areas, stop and sound your horn. This alerts others to your presence and helps prevent collisions with forklifts, pedestrians, or other moving equipment. Operators who fail to stop for intersections or drive with excessive speed are the cause of many incidents resulting in injury and property damage. Some common ways pedestrians are injured by forklifts include being crushed between a moving lift truck and a solid object, being struck by falling materials while standing under a raised load, being injured while attempting to ride on a forklift, and falling while being lifted by the forks or on a load. Pedestrians don't often realize the dangers presented by your truck, so it's up to you to keep them safe. Of course, in order to protect them, first you must be able to see them, and traveling with a blocked view makes that impossible. Traveling with a load that blocks your view creates a dangerous situation that leads to many incidents each year.
Remember again, only trained, authorized employees may operate our forklifts. Immediately report any and all accidents. Wear your seatbelt at all times. No one is allowed to stand or pass under raised forks. The controls should only be operated from the driver's seat. Do not stand next to it. Most of our forklifts have weight sensors in the seats, so you actually cannot operate the tilt and lift unless you're sitting in the seat. Don't block exits or emergency equipment, and no smoking. Always look in the direction of travel. Keep your body inside the cage. If you're backing up, don't stick your hand on the outside of the overhead support, because if someone comes too close to you in another forklift or you take a corner too tight, you could crush your hand. Keep the load low. Okay, you should never have the forks high enough that the mast is raised. Ideal travel height with your load is about 6 inches. Use your horn. Operate at safe speeds. Watch your rear end swing when you turn, and be aware of overhead clearance. When two forklifts have to pass each other in a narrow aisle, it's best for one forklift to stop completely and allow the other to proceed. Avoid loose objects or holes so you don't tip over. If the load blocks your view, travel in reverse. And when you travel in reverse, turn your head. Okay, this is what people forget. You have mirrors on your forklift to assist you, not to look backward for you. You turn your head in the direction you are traveling. Again, pedestrians always have the right of way. Maintain a safe distance from the edge of ramps or loading docks. No eating or drinking while on the forklift. And maintain a safe following distance. That's the length of 3 to 5 forklifts so you have time to react to what the forklift in front of you is doing. There's a question on your test, if you're paying attention here, that asks if you have to leave the forklift unattended, okay, even with it in park, you have to be what? The answer would be you have to be in clear view of it and no more than 25 feet away. If you have to go further away than that, it has to be completely disengaged, okay, and should have the key taken out of it. Some instances that's not going to happen because we have multiple operators using the same lift. Okay, but you have to disengage the forklift, meaning park it, put the forks down, put it in park, okay, meaning put the park lock on and turn the key to off if you're going to not be in clear view or within 25 feet. When parking, lower your forks, put it in neutral, set the parking brake, turn off the key. If you have to refuel propane, it's important to remember that propane is a combustible, compressed gas. You can detect leaks by the distinct odor, a hissing sound, or frost on the fittings. Liquefied propane can give you frostbite, so it's important that when you're working with propane tanks, you wear gloves and safety glasses at all times. Some of the operating hazards you'll run into in our environment would be ramps, slippery floors, poor lighting, congestion. Your loads could be large or bulky, have uneven weight, broken pallets, be poorly stacked. If you have a load with a broken pallet, move it onto a good pallet. If your load is poorly stacked, get them to restack it before you move it. You also have to worry about pedestrians. They may be messing around, not aware that your forklift is there, or just plain not paying attention. You have to account for that as an operator because you are responsible for keeping those people safe. When loading trucks, the brakes of the truck have to be set and wheel chocks placed under the rear wheels to prevent the truck from rolling away while the forklift is in the back of it. Okay, maintain a safe distance from the edge of ramps or platforms, and remember, the responsibility for chocking the wheels does not fall on the driver. That is always the responsibility of the forklift operator. We have to make sure the wheels are chocked before we enter the trailer.
Over there, right now. Load that one up.
All right, you got it.
The driver had completed his training a few weeks earlier, but in an effort to quickly comply with the supervisor's directions, neglected a serious safety procedure.
Yeah, Ralph did what the foreman told him to do, load the truck, but I don't know if he ever checked to see if the wheels were chocked or not.
Inspect your dock plate. Make sure it's in good shape, it's secure. Check the condition of the trailer floor by jumping up and down in there a couple times without the forklift in there. Again, make sure the wheels are chocked and make sure the nose of the trailer is supported by a truck or a fixed jack. Here is what your ideal dock situation should look like. You've got fixed jacks supporting the front of the trailer, you have chocks in front of the wheels to make sure it can't roll away, and you have a dock board.
Once the trailer or rail car has been secured, the floor system must be inspected. If the flooring looks rotten or feels spongy, do not enter. Floor systems can become unstable and collapse under the weight of a forklift.
Again, getting back to pedestrians, remember that they always have the right of way. Slow down, sound your horn at intersections, use that horn to warn people that you're coming, and no stunt driving or horseplay. For ramps and inclines, you always want the heavy part of your truck to be uphill. So if you're empty, drive in reverse up the incline, drive forward down the incline. If you have a load on, you don't want that load to fall off, so drive forward up the incline and drive in reverse down the incline. Carbon monoxide is an issue when working with propane-powered forklifts indoors. Concentration levels of carbon monoxide can't exceed 50 parts per million. We have carbon monoxide monitors on the wall in East Grand Forks. we need you to notify a supervisor immediately if you see the levels start to rise, I'd say above 10 parts per million. The symptoms of carbon monoxide overexposure are headache, weakness, dizziness, nausea, shortness of breath, confusion, blurred vision, and loss of consciousness. If we see those levels start to rise, we will turn on auxiliary ventilation and vent the room. Okay? And we see the levels rise not when the forklifts are operating. The forklifts are creating those carbon monoxide fumes, but they're also moving and creating an air current. It's once we stop the forklifts and all of that gas starts to settle that we see the levels rise. So at break times, at lunchtime, at the end of the day, that's when we see the highest levels of carbon monoxide, and that's when it's important to be checking those monitors frequently. Maintain visibility. Always look in the direction of travel. If the load blocks your view, travel in reverse or use a spotter, and frequently check your blind spots. If the load's blocking your view, again, don't try to look around it, don't try to look over it, travel in reverse, or get somebody to spot you and tell you where to go. Some injury statistics related to forklifts. Every year, there are over 800,000 forklifts in the U.S., and 11% of those will be involved in an accident. There are about 61,000 non-serious accidents per year, 35,000 accidents resulting in serious injury, and 85 fatalities related to forklifts. The way most of those happen is being crushed by the vehicle tipping over. That's why you don't try to jump out if your forklift is tipping over. Next would be being crushed between the vehicle and a solid surface. That's why you don't drive up to anyone standing in front of a bench or a fixed object. Next would be being crushed between two vehicles and being struck or run over by a forklift. That's why pedestrians always have the right of way, so you don't run them over. You pay attention to where they are. Then being struck by falling material or falling from the platform on the forks. That's why we never lift people with the forklift, okay? That's not what they're for. At no time can you permit riders on your forklift. At no time can you lift people up with your forks. 70% of these accidents could have been avoided with proper training. Well, you're getting the training now, and it's up to you to follow the training. What we've got here is a little point of view demonstration that we did a few months back in the East Grand Forks warehouse to give people an idea of just how congested, crowded, and overpopulated an environment our forklifts are asked to operate in. You can see here you've got about 5 forklifts operating in this little packing area in the back of the East Grand Forks warehouse. Requires you to be super vigilant and requires you to do a lot of waiting for other forklifts. You can see here at this point, this operator doesn't even know what he's going to pick up yet. He's going to go down first to the whiteboard at the end of the alley and see what needs picking up. Before he can get there, he's got to wait for 3 other forklifts to get out of the way. And then, when he goes to pick up what he wants to pick up, you'll see here in a second, there's already another operator waiting to go and pick that up.
The poly?
So he's going to turn himself around and go find something else to do. Here in bin 9, probably the most dangerous corner we have in the place is this one right here, going from bin 9 into bin 7. So it's extremely important that you take your time going around this corner and don't do what this operator does. Okay, you'll see that he doesn't allow this other forklift to get completely out of his way. He's got to shoot the gap and squeeze in that corner there. Don't do that. Let the other forklifts get out of your way first, and then go in there and make your turn. So, we don't have the most efficient forklift operations. You'll see now. Now he's going to sit and wait for this tote to fill up before he picks it up. Once it's full, now he will pick it up and back it off with the tote loader. And then he has to go back down the alley to the other side of bin 9 to put it on the scale. Doing this all the while with a partially blocked view. Ideally, he'd be traveling in reverse right now because he's got about a 10-foot blind spot in front of his forklift because of the height of that tote. Again, I just put this in here to give you guys an idea of what you're getting into when being hired on to operate a forklift in East Grand Forks. It takes vigilance, it takes patience, it takes a skilled operator to avoid accidents in this environment. What do you suppose went wrong here? If you look, you can see that his forks are up so high that the mast is raised, and now the mast is taller than the entry to the building. You can see that he hit the edge of this building hard enough to pull his drive wheels up off the ground significantly, so he was traveling at too great a speed besides. But this is why you don't run around with the mast raised. Here, we have a couple instances of people being lifted up by the forks. We never lift people with a forklift unless we are using an approved man basket. Scissor lifts are meant for lifting people up. Okay? Boom lifts, man lifts, those are designed for lifting people. Ladders are a great way to get to height. Okay? Lifting people on the forks on a pallet, totally unacceptable. You must use the man cage and have that chained to the backrest. Do not climb on top of your forklift at any time. Your forklift is not a ladder. You should never get out of the forklift with the forks upraised. Several things wrong in this picture. It may not be easy to see all of them. Okay. You can see on the side of the forklift, it says weight limit 4,550 pounds. You can see that the load is labeled 5,000 pounds. Like almost no load is labeled, but that's just to illustrate that he's overloaded. In addition, he does not have his load all the way against the backrest of the forks. You can see he's got a broken pallet. He's about to run over a piece of it. He's drinking, and he has a rider on the back. No riders anywhere on the forklift at any time. And there's one last what went wrong demonstration here. I ask you to watch these two gentlemen. They give you multiple opportunities to identify something that they do wrong, both the operator and his helper. You'll see here the first thing that happens that goes wrong is that this guy ducks right under the elevated load. Okay. Now there's multiple things to watch. Watch the driver here, as well as the helper. The driver's going to do the first no-no here in a second. See, he throws his cigarette butt on the ground. I'm not talking about it's a no-no to throw your butt on the ground. You shouldn't be smoking in the first place when you're operating a propane-powered forklift. Now, watch his front wheels. You'll see that he's jerking back and forth, can't maintain control, and as a result, ends up almost running into this guy. And now when they're lifting it up, the guy's thumb is still stuck in the strap. And the coup de grace here is that once all the straps are on and the guy goes to pick up his load, look at where he's located. He's right inside the overhead door, so now he can't even back out. He has to put the load back down in order to get out of there. Thank you for your time today. Just want to urge you to remember the simplest way to operate a forklift safely is keep it low, keep it slow. Keep your loads low to the ground. Keep your speed at a slow, safe speed, okay, which would be a fast walk. And you should have no problems. Thank you.